From the 1979 revolution to the 2026 war for decades, one rivalry in the Middle East has quietly shaped global politics. A conflict not always fought with tanks or soldiers, but through intelligence operations, cyber warfare, and proxy battles. The confrontation between Iran and Israel. Welcome to Global Pressure Point, the channel where we uncover the truth behind global conflicts, power struggles, and the events shaping our world. What began as a political shift inside Iran in 1979 eventually evolved into one of the most dangerous geopolitical confrontations of the modern era. A rivalry that has influenced wars, alliances, oil markets, and global security. And in 2026, after decades of rising tension, this shadow conflict exploded into open warfare. But to understand how the world reached this point, we must go back to the moment everything changed. The Iranian Revolution. Before 1979, the relationship between Iran and Israel was very different. In fact, the two countries were not enemies at all. During the rule of Iran's monarch, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, Iran maintained diplomatic and economic relations with Israel. The two countries cooperated in intelligence, trade, and security. Iran even supplied oil to Israel and allowed Israeli businesses to operate within the country. Both nations shared a strategic concern about Arab nationalism and regional instability. At that time, Iran was closely aligned with Western powers, especially the United States. But this alliance would not last, because in 1979, Iran experienced one of the most dramatic revolutions of the 20th century. In 1979, mass protests and political unrest led to the collapse of the Iranian monarchy. The Shah was overthrown, and a new Islamic government was established under Ruhollah Khomeini. This revolution completely transformed Iran's domestic and foreign policies. The new leadership rejected Western influence and strongly opposed Israel. The revolutionary government accused Israel and the United States of supporting oppression in the region. Diplomatic relations between Iran and Israel were immediately cut off. The Israeli embassy in Tehran was closed. And Iran began openly supporting movements opposed to Israeli policies. From this moment onward, Iran and Israel became ideological enemies. A rivalry that would shape Middle Eastern politics for decades. After the revolution, Iran adopted a foreign policy focused on resisting Israeli and American influence in the Middle East. Iran began supporting groups that opposed Israel. These alliances created a regional network of partners, sometimes referred to as the Axis of Resistance. Meanwhile, Israel viewed the new Iranian government as a growing threat. Unlike previous regional rivals, Iran was a large country with significant resources, population, and strategic influence. And over time, the rivalry deepened. However, despite intense hostility, Iran and Israel did not fight direct wars for many years. Instead, they fought what analysts call a shadow war. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, tensions between Iran and Israel continued to rise. But rather than direct military confrontation, the conflict often took place behind the scenes. Intelligence agencies conducted covert operations. Cyber warfare targeted infrastructure, and mysterious explosions damaged key facilities. Scientists connected to nuclear programs were assassinated. Military convoys were attacked. Ships connected to either country were sabotaged. Neither side openly admitted responsibility for many of these incidents, but each blamed the other. This hidden conflict continued for years, quietly escalating tensions. One of the biggest turning points in the rivalry came in the early 2000s. International investigators discovered evidence that Iran was developing advanced nuclear technology. Iran insisted the program was for peaceful purposes such as energy production. However, Israel strongly opposed Iran's nuclear ambitions. Israeli leaders feared that Iran could eventually develop nuclear weapons. If Iran became a nuclear power, it could dramatically shift the balance of power in the Middle East. Because of this concern, Israel repeatedly warned that it would never allow Iran to obtain nuclear weapons. This issue became one of the most dangerous flashpoints in international politics. Sanctions were imposed on Iran. Diplomatic negotiations were attempted, but tensions remained high. As the years passed, the rivalry between Iran and Israel expanded beyond their borders. Iran strengthened its influence across several parts of the Middle East. Meanwhile, Israel deepened its security partnerships with Western allies. These competing alliances turned the Iran-Israel conflict into a regional geopolitical struggle. Events in neighboring countries often intensified tensions between the two rivals. Missile development, cyber operations, and intelligence activities increased on both sides, and the possibility of a direct confrontation became more realistic. By the early 2020s, tensions between Iran and Israel had reached new levels. Regional conflicts, nuclear negotiations, and military incidents increased instability across the Middle East. In 2025, a brief but intense confrontation known as the 12-Day War took place between Iran and Israel, with the United States also targeting Iranian nuclear facilities. Although a ceasefire temporarily ended the fighting, the underlying tensions remained unresolved. Diplomatic efforts failed to produce lasting agreements, and military preparations continued on both sides. The stage was being set for a much larger conflict. On February 28, 2026, the situation escalated dramatically. Joint military strikes by the United States and Israel targeted multiple locations across Iran. The attacks focused on nuclear facilities, missile sites, and military infrastructure. In the first wave of strikes, hundreds of targets were hit. Among those killed was Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. The attack shocked the world, and Iran responded quickly. Missiles and drones were launched toward Israeli cities and American bases across the region. Air defense systems were activated, airspace closed. Military forces across the Middle East were placed on high alert. The long shadow war between Iran and Israel had finally turned into open conflict. The 2026 conflict did not remain limited to two countries. Missile strikes and military operations spread across several parts of the region. The conflict also affected global energy markets. The strategic shipping route known as the Strait of Hormuz became a major point of tension. Nearly 20% of the world's oil supply passes through this narrow waterway. As the conflict intensified, shipping disruptions and security concerns pushed oil prices higher and created economic uncertainty worldwide. Governments across the world watched closely, fearing that the conflict could expand into a much larger war. The conflict between Iran and Israel did not appear overnight. It developed slowly over decades, from the 1979 revolution, to nuclear tensions, to covert operations and proxy battles, and finally to the open conflict of 2026. This rivalry has reshaped alliances, influenced wars, and affected global politics. And even today, the future of this conflict remains uncertain. One thing is clear. The relationship between Iran and Israel will continue to play a crucial role in the stability of the Middle East and the security of the world. Thank you for watching Global Pressure Point. If you want more deep analysis on global events, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.